Hi, my name is Dorian, and this is You, Me, and the Industry. A podcast where I get to hang out with people from the games industry and talk with them about their job, the industry, and a bunch of other stuff. On this episode, I'm joined by Masao Kobayashi, host of the What Else Do You Do podcast, and studio manager of Cut to Bits. We discuss growing up in Japan, pitching games to publishers, and cultural differences. Furthermore, we go into detail on community management, learning from mistakes, and Masao shares his 3 essential manga recommendations. Please enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. Today I have the great pleasure to be joined by Masao Kobayashi. Masao is an industry veteran with over 15 years of industry experience. He formerly worked at Ubisoft on games such as Rainbow Six Siege and Far Cry 5. Currently he's the producer at the indie studio Cut to Bits, which he also co-funded. In his spare time he runs the podcast called What Else Do You Do, where he interviews people from the games industry and asks them what they are doing besides game development. Masao, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How is it going these days?
Not bad. Things are going pretty well. The studio's doing well. We have a publisher, and our game is moving along. And I really can't complain. Things are going pretty well.
That's awesome, yeah. And I guess, especially in these times, if you say I can't complain, that's already a big plus. Like in life, it's like a big thumbs up, I guess, with everything that's going on.
Yeah, I'm healthy. My family's healthy. Work is going well, and I feel very lucky, considering
that's awesome.
Considering the state of the world.
Right.
I think it's important to focus on things that are going well.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it also, I guess, these times are also humbling oneself when we see how other people are currently faring.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are out of people's controls right now.
Right, yeah.
Between inflation and global political instability and
yeah, totally.
Like material shortages. Like it's it's difficult times, that's for sure.
Yeah. And what we usually do here at the podcast is that we kick off the show with a guest topic. But you just told me that so nothing is currently on your mind right now, and that's no issue because I have a very particular segment of questions. And because since I noticed you on Twitter regarding your podcast, I think one of my former guests, I think maybe Rebecca Valentine or something, posted about it. And I saw a lot of guests we had sort of in common, so it's very interesting. I thought, I wanna reach out to another.
I looked at your guests and I'd say,
Eric Rami was there and Rebecca Valentine.
Yeah, and Liam Wang.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. I guess maybe that's the.
Yeah. And
I know Gary.
Yeah, and also a couple of people I reached out to, but weren't able to get a response, which is also totally fine. No obligation here. But I thought it was interesting because my podcast sort of started out in sort of putting a face or a voice on the people, and they're actually human beings working on these games. Mm-hmm. And also what I like to do is like I said was the guest topic is sort of give the guests an opening to talk about stuff they really care about. And it's funny because your entire podcast is focusing around that. You even went further than I did. You said, let's make an entire show about this. And I actually just made an opening for them with the guest topic. But it's so interesting to see that you went with this topic. How did you came up with that idea?
I wanted to do a podcast, and since most of the people I talk to on the internet are games people, I figured video game industry focused podcast made sense. And I mean, as you said, I've been in the industry for a while. It's going to be it's a little over 16 years that I've been in the industry. And the thing about games people is that they talk about games all the time.
Right.
You know, you hang out, you know, you go and grab a beer with like, you know, industry friend, and what you talk about is like, how's your studio going? How's your project going? Like, and I'm just kind of tired of it. Like, obviously I still have to talk about games to people. Like, that's my job. I'm the producer, but I'm also the studio manager. So I do biz dev for the studio, and that requires me to do a lot of networking and kind of having a good idea what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the business. But I didn't want to do that like on a podcast.
Right.
On top of it, because that just seemed kind of, I don't know, it's what I do anyway. And
right.
And also kind of I started the podcast during like the kind of the peak of the, like the, you know,
pandemic,
like can't go anywhere, can't do anything.
Sure.
And I wanted a way to kind of connect with people that was more human than just like based on industry. So yeah, that's kind of why that kind of evolved out of that. And I also want to promote a kind of I hate the word like work-life balance, because work is part of life, and like it's not. But anyway, I do think that games people are too caught up in games, and I think it's generally unhealthy, and it's also kind of boring. I think people need to take inspiration from outside of video games for video games, instead of just like, you know, talking about Zelda for the millionth time. Or, you know, worse, like a Soulsborne game.
Oh yeah.
That they wish that they were making instead of whatever
is
the
that
game that
actually
they're
a
making.
genre? I haven't heard about it. Like
Soulsborne?
Are there games like that? Really?
I mean, anything that FromSoft makes, I guess, or
really?
has made basically in the last close to 20 years.
Sure.
I mean, they used to make other games, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean,
they might go back to making other games.
I actually don't think so. With the success of Elden Ring, I think the horse is dead. I think nothing will bring back. I don't know, but I actually think they were talking about bringing back. I think what's it called Armored Core. Or what's it
Armored
called,
Core. Yeah, well, that's the thing. At some point, they're gonna grow, right? Or if they have any ambition to grow, like if they want to have more than one, like basically pipeline.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like then they're gonna, because at some point they're gonna self-compete, right? Like there's only so many, you know, like Souls-like games that they can actually produce. So if the company is going to continue to grow, which is not a guarantee, like, you know, you have studios like Rockstar, which essentially just make GTA and occasionally do something else, which is basically GTA with a different skin.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not saying that it's not a possibility, but generally I think people want to do other stuff. So
right, yeah. I think, maybe they won't release a new GTA. Maybe they will just focus back on the table tennis games again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're working on another GTA with the leak and everything. But
very likely. But maybe the new table tennis game will also leak sooner or later.
I don't know. I'm not so sure that they're going back to table tennis, but
maybe not. Yeah.
Didn't they have a driving game at some point?
Midnight Club, I think, right?
Midnight Club, yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think that's everything. I think that the biggest chance we can get is like another bully game, but I think even that.
Even Bully is essentially GTA.
Like I said, I think this is like the furthest you can go at this point, I think. But I think
Red
they're
Dead.
Already too
There's definitely going to be more Red Deads, I think.
Yeah, sure. Like Red Dead and like GTA, I think is like the things they will push forward. But I think even Bully is like too little in scope for these folks over there, I think.
But we'll see. You never know.
I mean, you never know.
And I guess technically they've never canceled Agent. So.
Oh, right. Yes, this is also coming. And you know what I found interesting is I think, you yourself said actually you did the podcast for yourself. So there was also something, I guess, maybe something, let's say it's therapeutic, or like something that you gained from doing the podcast, or what was like the motivation?
I mean, I say that pretty frequently because or did when I was actually actively doing the podcast. I'm kind of on hiatus because I have too much on my plate.
Right.
But it's more that I wanted to have these conversations. Like, really, like, the fact that it was recorded and put on the internet was kind of incidental. Like,
Sure,
I
yeah.
wanted to meet these people. I generally choose, like, initially I thought I was supposed to, like, choose people that I'm supposed to, like, have on the podcast because they'll be good for reach or whatever. And then I
Right.
realized, like, I don't really care that much how successful the episodes were. Like, it's great when more people listen to it, I guess, but like, it didn't really matter that much. And because like it's such a like a niche subject anyway, like
Right.
I'm never going to have like millions of people listening to me. And it was never intended to be something that was supposed to be monetized or like I don't know, have some kind of return other than what it is.
Enjoyment or yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I mean. Like, I talk to people I want to talk to about things I want to talk to them about. So I think it's interesting, so I share it to the world, but like I sort of don't care if anybody listens to it, and I sort of
Right.
don't care what like people
Yeah.
get out of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope people get something out of it,
Sure, yeah.
and I hope people like, enjoy it, and I hope the guests enjoy it, obviously. Like I'm not like a sociopath,
Yeah, sure, yeah.
but at the same
Yeah.
time, it's not what it's about. Like
Right,
it's
yeah.
primarily about the fact that I want to have these conversations.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit same for me, but I also think like I'm a little bit not sad, but I think like those episodes I actually like, I can only speak for myself. The episodes I do, I wish like sometimes people would like more people would listen to them because I think just like the guest is like so interesting, and then they're like these stories are actually worth being told, and that's the only stuff. It's not really for myself. I don't think about like me being like the big shot and like earning like the Spotify dollars or something. It's more like, oh, you know what? I actually think like this was a really great conversation we just had, and I wish like more people would actually tune in. It's not like really on like, yeah, I wish I could like gain something from that. And yeah, I mean, like you said about the hiatus, like yeah, but right before the hiatus, you actually did a very big, like I guess, a big special on like Asian representation in the industry.
Yeah, well, I kind of split the podcast in two in the end. I had two podcasts, which is maybe one of the reasons I ended up going on hiatus, because it was too much.
Right.
But yeah, so I had a podcast called How Asian Do You Feel as well,
Right.
which focused on kind of the experience of the Asian diaspora and kind of what it means to be Asian
Right. Yeah.
outside of Asia, and what it means to be Asian in general, because it's a weird word, to be honest.
It's very tricky. I'm actually part Asian myself, so it's very
Yeah.
tricky. It's like, yeah,
Like,
it's a
Asia
weird
is not,
situation.
like, in my opinion, Asia should not be called Asia. Like it's too vast, and the fact that Asia and
Right.
Europe are like considered separate region is kind of ridiculous as well, because it's a single continent.
Yeah. Right.
And like Europe is so tiny compared to Asia.
That's right.
Like they call it like Eurasia, but like Europe is like what, 20% of
Yeah,
Eurasia?
Very small. Very small. Yeah.
Because like Asia includes basically Russia, like Northern Asia, like Central Asia. So, like former USSR
Yeah.
countries. And then there's Southwest Asia, which is like, area called the Middle East, or frequently referred to as the Middle East.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
the South Asian subcontinent with India, Pakistan, Nepal, like Southeast Asia and East Asia. Like that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's not even like, that is such a vast area.
Yeah,
And
totally.
considering the fact that pretty much anything that isn't the Egyptian civilization, pretty much all ancient civilizations come from Asia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the Greeks are kind of right on the border, right? So they're
Yeah,
arguably like they're just on the other side of Asia Minor. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. I guess it's just something sort of like the biracial people are sort of like
Oh, I'm not even talking about the biracial people. I'm just talking about like what does Asia even mean? Like if something includes like basically like the you know like everybody from like the native population of northern Russia to like the Middle East to like Japanese people are supposed to be a single group. Like that's
yeah,
absurd.
yeah, sure. What I was going to tell is like it's difficult for biracial people to sort of like feel aligned to just like the one continent of Asia because like I said, like I used to live in China for a while and like
Yeah.
China is already very different from South and North. But I mean, just and then put in like India and Japan and Korea and like everything else and just like yes, those everyone is the same here. And like I was like no, and
Well, I
I
mean,
don't think it's
China,
as
yeah,
easy.
well, China at least has like at least, or China is actually a really, I think, good representative of what Asia, how
Right? Yeah.
complex Asia is,
Yeah.
because like they
Exactly.
have so many like racial minorities and
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
regionally it's so different. Like people think of like Chinese people as Han Chinese, which,
Right.
is the majority of their people, but still,
Yeah.
like it's not everybody.
Right. Yeah.
What is it? 46 ethnic groups, I think, are
Yeah, I
represented,
think yeah.
officially
I'm not.
recognized or something.
Yeah, I'm actually not quite sure how many are still out there in the current government program of the re-education. Let's call them
Oh,
that one, which are sort of like enslavement camps. So
yeah.
yeah, which is kind of really rough right now. And yeah, but that's a rough one. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of is along the history of China, like at
Yeah.
pretty much every, well, yeah, I don't want to minimize the suffering of current people, but
Yeah.
I feel like every period has had a empire that's in charge of China tends to kind of say that this is now the new China, and
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe let's like talk about like your connection and like you. I think you were growing up in Japan for 15 years until you moved to the
Yeah,
States. I
I
think.
yeah, I grew up in Japan,
Right.
and my father's Japanese, my mother's
Mm-hmm.
American, and
Yeah.
yeah, I moved to California when I was in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and went through high school and university there.
Right. And like I think this is like it's especially interesting because like do you feel like there was like a sort of like cultural clash for you when you sort of like grew up with like because I think like those early age like early years growing up are like really formative for lots of people. So was there like a real like big culture clash when you sort of started it and maybe there sometimes even is a little bit of a culture clash when you're talking about like the work environment or something. Is there like something where you still think interesting that it's like this or that?
Well, I've never felt like, well, growing up in Japan, I was a visible minority, and
Yeah.
I I had an American mother, so my cultural identity and understanding of the world was kind of a mix between American values, and although my mom is very both of my parents are very secular, like they're not religious people, but that being said, like I think I definitely had more leaning towards like individuality and individual
Mm-hmm.
freedom than an average Japanese
Mm-hmm.
person. But then again, I grew up in Japan and I read Japanese books, and all my
Mm-hmm.
friends were Japanese. So yeah, like I guess what I'm trying to say is like as a child, I definitely knew that there was a difference in the way that I saw the world and I interacted with the world than the people around me. I went When I went to the United States, I felt that that was still there. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think, and as I've gotten older, and I've now lived in Canada for 16 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really feel like there's anywhere that I don't particularly that I particularly feel that aligns with my experience, because like I'm kind of a global minority. Like there's
Right. Yeah.
nowhere. I mean, there are certain places that I feel more comfortable, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
like San Francisco has a lot of Asian presence, and there's a lot of people who kind of have that sensibility of kind of having multiple cultures and kind
Mm-hmm.
of understanding. Hawaii has a lot of people who are very mixed, and that's I always felt very comfortable there.
Do you feel like this like mixing, like meeting people that are mixed is sort of helpful to you?
I don't necessarily think it's helpful. It's just that there's more common ground.
Okay.
When I meet people who are, you know, a product of a single culture, it's just kind of exhausting to talk to them about certain things, because regardless of where they come from, when people are from like a majority culture, they are completely unaware of the fact that everything that they take for granted and assume is arbitrary.
Right.
And I think that's why it's kind of exhausting to kind of explain to them, like, yeah, I understand that you think it's not normal that other people don't like your food and like don't agree with your particular value, but like that's normal because that's not how they were raised, and having to explain that is kind of exhausting.
Okay. Yeah.
When I feel like when you have a culture that is more mixed, there's less of that, because people are aware that like, oh, all this is kind of bullshit. Like, you know, even things like gender, like masculinity is so different across cultures. So if you see like two, you know, contrasting ideas of masculinity that are supposed to be competing with each other, you know, like you're like, oh, okay, well, it's not like maleness is defined. Like, you know, gender is kind of arbitrary and created by society. So yeah, just stuff like that I find to be, and I guess that's kind of what I'm saying in terms of like cultural clash. Like, I don't necessarily feel is the right term, because it feels like I have a, like, it's the dynamic isn't that like I have a sensibility and I go somewhere else and they have a different sensibility and there's a clash. My issue primarily is that, as I said, like,
they're not aware.
Yeah, they're not aware that they're like there
could be something else.
There could be something else, and that their understanding is like rather, you know, limited.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I actually think one of the great movies about this is what's it called, The Farewell. If you have seen that one.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's about like a Chinese family, and like there's the favorite grandchild from the grandma, and they're calling every week. Like, she lives in China and the girl lives in New York, and then the family finds out that the grandma actually has a sort of cancer. But apparently in China, I'm not quite sure if this still is the case, but I guess it's this happened to the director Lulu Wang. The doctors aren't telling the person who is diagnosed with cancer, so they're telling the sister or the relatives or something. So the person who is cancer is not being told that they have cancer, and this is apparently something they handle like this in China. And of course, the first time I heard about this or I saw the movie, I was just like, that's crazy. Like, I mean, you have to, like, this would be totally crazy in Europe or in Germany. Like, they would say, like, this is like doctor-patient confidentiality.
It's a violation of human rights. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, but, it's. I don't know if it's currently like that, but when I was growing up, that was definitely the case in Japan.
Yeah. So, and then it's like, it was like very interesting to see, like, actually that the movie sort of makes a case for how this is handled. Like, even after the movie, you're still not like, I don't think this is like actually the way it should be handled, but you sort of understand that this culture sort of sees these issues differently, or these incidents happen differently, and also think like for example, they say the cancer is actually something that like the fear of dying is actually that's killing you, not really the cancer itself. Sort of like, you can't really enjoy anything, so you should sort of enjoy the last days, and the family as the collective should burden the weight of knowing that this person is going to die, which is like a crazy concept. But I think this sort of movie makes a strong case why this is also a way of thinking. Maybe even though it's not the right version in the end. And I don't want to say what's right or wrong, but I found it really, really fascinating to talk about this issue, or like this the way this culture is handling this.
I think handling terminal disease is an interesting topic. I think as a whole, the West over treats terminal illness. I remember reading this article. Actually, it all kind of started. I was on a plane once. This was like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting next to a brain surgeon. And we were talking about brain surgery and how basically most brain tumors are, like, if you get a brain tumor, if you get a significant brain tumor, like long-term survival is how long, your success, your chance of surviving the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's the kind of like scale that we're talking about. Like if you have significant brain tumor, like it's going to come back, and it's really a matter of time, and the chance that you're going to live like another, like
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years, 20 years is fairly low.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that's what he was talking about, and he was saying how people who work with cancer, like in oncology and brain surgery, frequently don't get like extensive chemotherapy for terminal cancer, because basically they know that like your quality of life is so bad that like, okay, you've managed to like extend your life for 4 months, 6 months, a year, but like, like at what cost?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so like the percentage of oncologists and brain surgeons that get like extensive life prolonging treatment is significantly lower than the general population.
Yeah.
Which I think indicates that like basically I think the West overtreats terminal cancer, which I think, I mean, this might be a hot take, but I think is a detriment to society, because basically they're, due to the fact that they're poorly informed, they're doing things that are extremely expensive and taxing to the medical industry, the medical system, which has a negative impact on society in general, and in doing so, making their quality of life, at their end of life, actually bad. So it's like a lose like combination.
But it's like a difficult topic, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's an extremely difficult topic. How do you tell people like, hey, like you could live a year,
right?
But like I suggest maybe you should die in 6 months. Like
exactly.
not, like.
Yeah, I mean, like tell that to some, like tell that to the relatives or somebody.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. And I think
we would strongly advise that this person should die in 6 months, and maybe enjoy them, but not a year.
Yeah,
it's because
tough, that's
right? I mean, it's a tough sell.
I mean, obviously, it's not, but yeah. So I think the way that we do kind of deal with death and deal with terminal disease, I think we should kind of look at as a society.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I have no idea what the right answer is. I don't. I mean, I've never really had to struggle with that. My parents are still around. And my grandparents that have passed away, we didn't really have to make kind of those decisions. Like none of them had to, go through extensive cancer treatment. Yeah. So they all died fairly quickly. So yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult conversation, that's for sure. Yeah.
And I mean, that's not something you're usually like also tasked to sort of think about when you're running a studio, like as your job. It's like,
it's really
not, like that's not like really like the topics that come up when you're talking to a publisher or something. So you're just like mentioning because that you now have a publisher or something for the upcoming game you're currently working on. But there's like something that I think you were mentioning on some on the different podcast before, that you're like dealing also with like the business side of the studio, like sort of publishing.
I'm the studio manager. Yeah,
exactly. So like also pitching to publishers and something. And there's like something I wanted to know. Like there are two things. So like first of all, like, do you feel like, I would just assume that you must have done a couple of these at least throughout your time. Maybe even internal pitches, or like also like I just said with the current game you're working on. Can you already tell when you sort of like see a person's face, or is there sort of like, can you tell when something is not really going the way you think it should or something? Is there like a tell when they say like, oh yeah, that was great, or if they aren't asking any questions when you're pitching something, or is it always like you can't really tell how it went or something?
Honestly, you can't really tell how things go until you're done. I mean, obviously, if they're completely disengaged and they're not interested, like, you know,
a bad sign.
Yeah, but then again, it could also be cultural. Like, there's like I gave presentation to Japanese people, and they generally don't respond on the spot, and they try to kind of keep things very close to their chest. So, you know, you can't even say across the board just because they're not like, and they don't tend to ask a lot of questions either. So, yeah.
And do you sort of tailor your pitch approach when it comes to sort of like, okay, and now I'm speaking to Japanese people, or now I'm speaking to this like big, like, let's just say like PlayStation or Microsoft, I'm compared to like a smaller publisher like Finji, for example? Like, do you like tailor the presentation or the way you speak?
I mean, maybe I should have done that, but no, not really. Like, we basically had one pitch that we gave. Basically, we had two variations of the pitch: one that we would give to a publisher, and one that we would give to like a fund that would do self-publishing, because like the ask is different. Like, if you're asking a publisher, hey, we'd like you to publish this game, and we'd like you to give us the money to finish the game. You know, what you're asking for is just the production cost. Whereas if you're asking a fund to help you self-publish, then like you need to basically bake in like, you know, publisher costs like marketing and localization and you know, playtesting, customer support, etc. So like, we did have two variation on the pitch deck, but that's mostly a budget thing. Right. Content-wise, we were pretty much the same. But then again, I don't think we were very good at pitching. We pitched for a while, and that's definitely one of the things that was weakest about our organization, because none of us had ever done biz dev before. I think looking back, we definitely approached it in a incorrect fashion. But yeah, that's, you know, hindsight is 2020 and all. So
yeah. And is there something that you could like maybe give the listeners on the like, they give like an advice or something that you were like you should really maybe think about this area in particular when you do a pitch? Or is there maybe even some sort of like a video or like a book that actually helped you in the end, or something you would just say lessons learned here is like, focus on this and not this?
The problem is that pitching is extremely personal. Like, what kind of pitch that your game needs is really depends on what kind of game that you're making, and what kind of studio you have, and what kind of funding you have. And so it's very difficult for me to give kind of blanket advice, which is part of the reason I had a really difficult time kind of talking to people, because like people give you extremely contradictory advice. Like, pretty much every piece of advice I got, like I got like somebody else would give me an advice that would be like the exact opposite. And it's not necessarily that people are wrong. It's just that like it's all very contextual, you know, what's right for one project is not necessarily right for another project. And also the industry itself is moving very fast, and the environment for pitching changes very rapidly from year to year. So what worked last year may not work this year, and what worked 5 years ago definitely doesn't work now. So, you know, yeah, I have no advice. It's very, my advice is very difficult.
I mean, like, you know, I think just like maybe keeping that in mind, that the one thing the person, maybe the listener, heard might not be the one and all truth, is also great advice. Like,
take every advice with a grain of salt, and that doesn't mean that like don't trust that person. It just means that like that might not apply to you. And the only way like you kind of have a better idea of what's going on is by doing it. Because you need to figure out what works for you, which nobody else can really help you with. I mean, there are people out there that will like help you with pitches, pitch prep, and like, and I do recommend reaching out to people like that. And also, I strongly recommend finding people who are doing what you're doing and try to share your knowledge and grow collectively, because like, as one person, you can only get so much experience at the same time. Whereas if you're doing it collectively with a group of people, then, you're all going to grow faster. So yeah, I guess that's really my only recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it worked for you in the end. So I guess you did something. You everyone at the studio did something right in the end. And
we have an excellent game, in my opinion. Like, I have a great team. We have a great team, and they put together a really great game. And I think that's why we succeeded in the end. Like, it's really not my pitch skills.
Okay. I mean, maybe you're selling yourself short, but actually it's great that it worked in the end, because, well, I think coming back or like returning to a sort of job you did before was really never an option for you. Like, okay, so I wanted to know, like, why I can't pay you enough to go back to community management? Like, what happened? Why was it so traumatic for you?
For me, primarily the reason I don't want to do community management again is because, well, that was within the context of AAA. I think that's kind of what's missing in the conversation. So I used to be the lead community developer for Ubisoft Montreal, and I did that for almost 5 years. It's a difficult job in general. Like, especially I did it from 2010 to 2014, and it was still kind of a new field. People were still trying to figure out what to do in it, because social media itself was fairly new in terms of kind of using it as a platform for promotion. And yeah, and there's a lot of great things about community, and it's clearly important and necessary part of entertainment business. But generally speaking, my experience was extremely negative internally. Like, a lot of companies don't know where to put community. Like, they either think of it as they usually think of it as like a extension of marketing. And generally marketing is measured by things like, sales,
right,
and pre-orders and stuff like that, which is not the objective of community. And it's really hard to like assign a dollar value to a healthy community or a community that's not toxic.
Sure.
So I think a lot of companies kind of have a hard time trying to kind of assess the real value of community. Another thing is that generally they're not really established part of the game's hierarchy of jobs. So they kind of end up being these like orphan departments that don't really have anywhere to go. So like, if you're in community and you've been doing it for a few years, like, where do you go out of that? Generally, people have to change jobs. Like, they either like switch to marketing, and usually that means like a lateral switch, and then you have to do that for a number of years before you can like get promoted. Or they, basically leave community to work on something within productions. So, I know people who are writers, artists, producers, stuff like that. So it's kind of problematic that basically you have this group of jobs that essentially have no way to like kind of grow within the company.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's I guess lots of obstacles, because I guess, maybe because like it's hard to sort of explain, like you said, the worth of a community, and also sort of hard to sell like what you did right, that like this place isn't a dumpster fire. So like, how do you sort of like quantify that and like say like, oh, I actually did a good job, or like we did a good job monitoring it and everything? I guess it's like they say like, okay, who cares? Like, I mean, I guess it's like very hard for some maybe business suit to understand like where the value is, like you said.
Yeah. So yeah, that's I think the big reason I don't ever want to do community again. Although I'm probably going to do a little bit of community management for our game, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to hire somebody else because I have too much on my plate already.
Okay, I mean,
I think in a smaller indie studio, I think it's a very different conversation, because obviously like
Yeah.
You know, there isn't a whole lot of like, I'm not looking to get promoted within the company because
I mean, you're the co-founder, right? I mean,
we're flat anyway. Like, we don't have
exactly.
many layers of promotion, period.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we're six.
Chief King, maybe?
We're 6 people right now, you know, like
right. Yeah.
internally, and then we
Yeah.
have freelancers, but like,
yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you said before, like, you've now spent, I guess, 16 years of your life in Canada. Like I said, you grew up in Japan and lived a while in the USA. So, like, between things like, you know, yakitori and horse sashimi, like, what are the things that you are, like, missing about, like, you're not readily available here in Canada when it comes to sort of, like, good Japanese food? Is there something you're still like, man,
I mean, there's not a lot of good Japanese food in North America and Canada and Montreal specifically. I think what I miss most about food is kind of fish in general is not that great in Quebec.
Oh, okay.
Compared to Japan. So yeah, I think that's the thing that I miss the most. Just fish.
Oh, okay.
In terms of cuisine, like, I wish that there was more diverse Japanese cuisine available because, you know, Japanese food is not just sushi and ramen, but like that's pretty much the only thing that's available outside of Japan. So yeah. Any
particular like thing, like yakitori, or something that you really think like, yeah, that's the one I wish I could have readily available?
It's impossible to get good tonkatsu outside of Japan, which
okay.
I think is
it's
really not hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody really does it. Especially because the pork here, especially in Canada, the pork is really good. So
okay.
You could have a really good tonkatsu restaurant in Montreal. There's really nothing's stopping anybody, but that is definitely the case.
Right. Yeah. And have you ever thought about like when you're talking about Japan and you growing up there, like, have you ever thought about like why there's such a small indie space there? I think this is like still one of the areas that is so fascinating because like I think, well, I guess when we talk about games, like back in the day, everything came from Japan and like they were like the big exporters when it comes to video games. But I was always so surprised that there was not a very big indie scene. We have like the things that are now very Japanese inspired, like Undertale, for example, which is like an American-made game.
There is an indie scene that's kind of growing. I think there's 2 reasons. One is the fact that basically there's a language barrier. So I think it's not really a very PC oriented culture.
That's right, yeah.
So considering the fact that like a lot of the indie scene grew with Steam, so Japan's kind of disconnected to that in general. Another aspect is funding. Like, Japan doesn't have a lot of funding options. Like, if you're internally in Japan, like, talking to Japanese publishers are generally very bad about giving funds, which means that these games tend to be very small. Like, most of the indies in Japan are like what I consider micro indies. So like either single developers or very, very small groups of people making video games, which, you know, kind of limits the possibility of what you can do and the commercial success. Like, most of like the bigger indie hits are generally games that are made by more than 1 or 2 people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think also the team from 8-4 is pushing a little bit the indie scene with the Asobu project, I think it's called. That they're actually highlighting
I went to Asobu when I visited Tokyo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they're trying, but at the same time, again, it's about money and access and knowledge, and it's lacking in those areas. Like, the business knowledge of promoting and selling video games, selling indie games is not very present. And I think that makes everything more difficult.
Yeah. I think, do you think they're like, I think nowadays it's more sort of like it has died down a bit, but do you think that a Kickstarter would be a route those devs could go? No.
Problem is that Kickstarter, it's very difficult to raise a significant amount of money in Kickstarter. Like, nowadays, like, you know, raising somewhere around $60,000 or $100,000 is supposed to be successful for a video game on Kickstarter, which like a cheap game costs like $1 million to make. So
Right. Yeah.
it's just not very viable.
Yeah. I mean, I think the lessons learned from the Double Fine documentary were still apparent in my head.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I do feel that I think the reason the Kickstarter video game situation is the barren desert that it is because the people who were successful there completely fucked it up. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of on them, to be honest. So
yeah, a lot of people feel burned. Yeah.
I think they should feel a sense of responsibility for the fact that they basically kind of ruined it for people who are coming up behind them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not sure Kickstarter is the right. I mean, honestly, it's hard because like people who would be extremely successful on Kickstarter are extremely successful raising money in other ways.
Right. Yeah.
Because like you need to be famous to be successful on Kickstarter, and if you're famous, then there's other ways of getting money. So,
right. I mean, what one would think, but I think one of the like project I backed was like Thimbleweed Park from Ron Gilbert, and I would just imagine that like, I mean, Ron Gilbert could just like get some money somehow, but I guess it wasn't the case. I mean, he just released a new Monkey Island, but still, like I was like shocked that they weren't able to get funds otherwise.
I mean, unable to, I think. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what his circumstance is, and I can't really. The thing is, it's extremely difficult. Like we pitched for a full year before we actually signed a deal. So, and I know people who have pitched for even longer.
Okay.
I know I've heard of games where they started to pitch something and then like it didn't work out, so they pitched something else and they made that game and then they went back to pitching the first game. And then, raise money that way. So it's like,
yeah, that's rough. Yeah.
Like it's extremely difficult out there, even for people who are successfully pitching games.
Yeah. Right.
So when I hear people like, oh, well, I was not able to raise money, so we decided to do this other thing. It's like, well, take that with a grain of salt because it's not like, nobody's handing out money to anybody.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And does that sometimes give you like sleepless nights when you think about, like you just said, you were pitching for an entire year? Like, does it sometimes like make you question yourself or the way you're sort of approach some things? Like,
well, I mean, obviously, we did question ourselves because like we changed our approach, and like,
right.
You should question yourself. If you're doing something and it's not working, then you need to like adjust.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, like. It was pretty stressful there for a minute. We were getting pretty close to like running out of money. So.
Oh, wow, okay.
But
yes,
we're okay in the end.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to all these, all the upcoming games. We're hopefully releasing. Let's stay with one in the beginning, but maybe it's successful. Hopefully, we see more from you over there with the 6 people team you're currently going on there.
Well, we have 10 full-time people working on the project right now.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
6 employees.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, awesome. Looking forward to that. And before we the time already flew by. And before we close off the show, I have one final question. And this is sort of a personal thing for me, because you know what? Back in the day when I grew up, I was first introduced to manga from a friend of mine. Okay. And I was totally obsessed with Dragon Ball. And I think since then I just read occasional, like I think I read it's called like Love Hina or something, and then it stopped totally. And then now I have like a sustainable income and everything, and now I went back to finally reading Berserk and a couple of a couple of Junji Ito stuff. But I mean, what did I miss? Like, Masa, what is all like the things I actually like really miss? Because like when I Google like best manga, there's all this stuff around. Like, but I mean, I think you're a big fan. Like I think last time you went to Japan,
I've read a lot of manga.
Okay, so maybe you can give me like a concise top 3 before we close off the show.
I mean, it's incredibly subjective. I think what's really great about manga, and it's I think fairly different from a lot of the comics that's available outside of Japan, although I guess things are changing, is how, there is really great manga about absolutely everything.
Right, yeah.
There's a really great manga called Say Hello to Blackjack, which is about the Japanese medical system.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, that's profound and depressing and interesting and human. Let's see. What are my personal favorites? I really love this comic book called Ushoto Tora, which is about this boy who discovers a spear that is for killing yokai, which is like a Japanese
Like a
ghost
demon,
slash
like
monsters.
ghosts, right, yeah.
And his kind of journey with this spear. That was really excellent. So Sailor Blackjack, Ushoto Tora, and maybe the third one is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. The comic version is also really good.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Hayao Miyazaki wrote a comic series based on that movie, or the movie is based on the comic, or I don't.
Is it
I don't
actually
know
the
which
entire story of the movie, or is it just goes beyond that?
It goes further. It's longer.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's longer.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same, but like it's 7 volumes.
Oh, okay.
I have it right here. Where is it?
I might have to check them out. Let me see.
So it's 7 of these volumes.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
And he drew all of it.
Man.
So yeah, Nausicaa is well recommended.
Back in the day where he still said manga and anime wasn't a mistake.
Wow. I don't really like him, and I think his more recent work has been kind of not that great. So
yeah.
I have my issues with him, but
yeah. Okay. And with those words, anime being a mistake, let's close off the show. Thank you so much for coming to the show. I had a blast talking to you, and really looking forward to the game once it's finally announced and unveiled to the public. Fingers crossed for 2023 release date. And let the people know where people can find you. And I guess what you're currently working on is still unannounced.
Yeah, people can find me generally on Twitter. I'm Mega Masao, MEGAMASAO. Yeah, that's really the best place to find me. My studio, or our studio, is Studio Cut to Bits. And we're going to be announcing soon, so keep your eyes out.
That's awesome, yeah. And follow him on Twitter and check out the studio, and also check out the podcast. What do you else do besides working in the games industry? Lots of great conversations, especially the one with Rebecca Valentine, where she talked about how she almost became a nun, was really fascinating.
Great interview. Yeah. She's a great guest.
Yeah, and then of course come back to this podcast and check out the episode I did with Rebecca talking about the games industry and the issues being a reporter. And if you want to follow the show, it's Yumi Industry on Instagram and on Twitter, and you can follow me at Dorian Chow on Twitter and on Instagram. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for having me.
And listen to you, see you, hear you, I guess, in the next episode. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.